I think we will wait for another 1 or 2 more minutes for the participants to join because there are many people are joining right now. I hope this is okay with the presenters. Perfect. Okay. Okay. I think this is a good time to start. Okay, I'll unmute Lester. Lester. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Anbiya wal Mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Respected speakers and all the participants, we are planning to start our session, and with this we will start our session with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On behalf of INOSEM as well as Institute of Oceanography and Maritime Studies and IIM Marine School flagship project, I would like to welcome the presenters as well as the participant to this webinar series. And we have many participants are joining time to time, but we are stick on time, so we will start our sessions by the way. Meanwhile, if any participants who have question, they can ask the question only after the presenters finish their presentation. Each presenter will be presenting about 15 to 20 minutes time, followed by 5 minutes of question and answer session. And anyone who wants to ask the question, you're most welcome to type in, or you can raise your hand, or just type some so that I can unmute you. We have two presenters today, one from National NSS Nature Society Singapore, Mr. Lester Tan, who is one of my close friend, and we have been working together for a long time already. And another one is Dr. Faisal Abdur Rani, and he's from Malaysia. So now we have presenters from both Singapore and Malaysia, and I hope this platform will be used as a good platform to merge the data between Malaysia and Singapore, so that something will come up nicely. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Lester, who will be presenting the first presentation. He is now currently affiliated with Nature Society Singapore. A brief introduction about Lester. He has been working as a volunteer with the Nature Society Singapore for about 11 years. He is currently a vice chairman of the Marine Conservation Group and lead for the Horseshoe Crab Resource and Research Project. With the dedication and passion about the marine environment, he is constantly learning and advocating about this species and habitat related to this species through the citizen science projects. He started out as a volunteer before becoming a member of the society, and most recently he is nominated as a member in the executive committee as well of the Nature Society Singapore. And he is a resourceful person, and without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Lester, please.
Okay, thank you for the great introduction. All right, let me get the screen up. Okay, so today we're going to talk about marine debris. My topic is literally a trashy tale on it. So without further ado, I'll start. So before we all begin, we need to understand what is marine debris. So everyone has different ideas on marine debris. And this is the definition right now. So in short, that's literally any solid material or any items that's been manufactured or processed by us, by human, that's indirectly or directly disposed into the marine environment itself. So it can be our trash, it can be a bottle that we accidentally drop. All those are all marine debris. So we also need to know what kind of marine debris are there. So these are the more common kind of marine debris. We have the usual drinking straws, food wrappers, your bottle cans, your drinking bottles, goes down to your styrofoam pieces that you get from your takeaway packaging, your grocery plastic bags, and other small little wrappers and small little bags that you pack, maybe your bread, a plastic bag that comes with your umbrella. So these are the more common marine debris items that we can find. Then we also get unexpected finds, or rather uncommon stuff. Things like part of a boat, kitchen sink, television, refrigerators, the remote controls. So I would say over the course of 5 years, I've collected enough furniture to actually build a room myself. So it includes air conditioning, fans, TV, tables, and chairs. Just enough furniture to actually have a room itself. We have other small little things like shrinks and milk bottles and all, and oil barrels. So all of these are not your common items that you will find, say, in your general waste or things that you use along the shorelines as well. And then, because we talk about items that's manufactured and tossed into the waters and the marine environment itself, we also have things like fishing nets and fishing rods to fishing baits. So literally drift nets, fishing traps. So as you can see in the images, you have a lot of different kind of traps. So when they talk about the threats of the nets later on, these are just more examples of drift nets that can be found. So a lot of time fishermen goes out for fishing that uses these nets, and unknowingly sometimes they will lose the net, or most of them might discard them just casually along the shorelines. And a lot of these nets crumble and tumble together, and it collects a lot of other marine debris along with it, and as well as other marine wildlife with it. So knowing the kind of trash and what are marine debris, we also want to find out the common source of marine debris. So we can easily split them into two categories. One, trash from land-bound sources, another directly from thrown into the sea. So a lot of this land-bound trash, we might just forget about things that we toss into our sink, into our sewage, into the drain, into our monsoon canals. So just out by a park, you might be next to a monsoon canal and you're drinking your 100 plus today, and you decide to toss it into a bin. And somehow this bin wasn't secured nicely to the ground, and it wasn't very covered. The lid was not covered, it was open. And a strong, heavy storm comes in, say, during the monsoon season, and your bin can be overturned. And all of this trash will be carried by wind into the monsoon drain and ends up in our open waters again. So these are just different scenarios where trash, your uncommon ways of trash that can make their way down into the marine environment itself. Other most common ways are just us discarding from the factory, from the industry, along the parks, we just toss it off into the canals, into the seashores, into the mudflats and mangrove itself. So this is the map of Singapore for most of you who haven't been to Singapore. So you have the green areas where those are mangrove forests or mudflats, and coastal parks on the top. On the southern part of Singapore, we have the East Coast Park on the eastern side. On the western side, it's more of industrial factories, a lot of industry and factories just by the shorelines. And then we have our southern island that's made up of different coastal habitats, from rocky shores to sandy beaches to these reef slopes as well. So all of these shorelines, trash can be found on it, and different sort of shorelines give us different kind of trash that's stuck in it, or different kind of trash that can be washed up on it as well. So we've been constantly doing one particular area at Kranji, which is the northwestern part of Singapore. And these are the kind of trash that we've been collecting, and we've been collecting the kg as well. How much trash have been collected throughout the years? So over the years, the amount of trash collected in terms of kg has went down drastically, because there might have been a lot of reasons. Factories has been closed. We have more high-tech factories right now. We have fenced up the northern shorelines as well. So there are less fishermen, less access to the shorelines for any rubbish to be thrown. However, we also notice a huge amount of marine debris. Right now, it's all microplastics, and lots of microplastics can be found instead of the usual huge plastic bottles or plastic bags. And this resulted in a difference in the kg amount of kg that we carry in from the shorelines after the cleanup. So we also want to understand then what are all these impacts after knowing where the trash comes from, what kind of trash can be found, and which part of the shorelines that can be found as well. So especially in all the shorelines, be it the sandy beaches, the mudflats, or the mangroves, many other animals call it their home. And these are just three images of three different habitats that we can find trash lodging in the corner of every inch and corner of the mudflat or mangrove or even a sandy beach. So these are just some of the wildlife that we can find on shorelines, from horseshoe crabs to crabs, your mussels, of course your fishes, your anemones, and last but not least, migratory shorebirds as well. So all these birds come over and stop by in our different coastal habitats to feed on before their journey down south. And remember the image earlier on. So these are the kind of typical image that we can find on the shorelines, especially right after the high tide comes in and the high tide goes out, leaving in a shop on the low tide period. These are the amount of plastic bottles, trash that you can find just on the shoreline itself. So different kind of trash then accumulate different kind of impacts that affects differently. With all these plastic bottles pumping around the mangrove area, we will stunt the growth of plants. And you also lose recyclable resources by losing them on the marine debris area. So just losing them out, just not being able to recycle them. The open plastic containers are also open to dengue fever. So dengue risks from just breeding mosquitoes, and also ingestion risk for animals. So all of this are the different kind of impacts that affect just not to wildlife, but also to the shoreline itself. So other kinds of threats will include the fishing gears trapping around wildlife, your horseshoe crabs, your nesting turtles. We have otters as well in our canal system and along our shorelines. And a lot of these fishing hooks also get stuck onto the otters, and most likely they will face a certain death. And as well as shorebirds. So I had this encounter with a shorebird where it was trapped in a barrel of oil and was unable to get out of it. So it stumbled down from the top of a tree and just managed to fall into a barrel of oil. And luckily it survived because some of us there was doing this marine cleanup, and we managed to rescue it. So not just only the animals that's living on the mudflats on the sandy shores, but even birds and monkeys who are living just by the shoreline or uses the shoreline to hunt for food also gets impacted by such marine debris. So more examples of other marine creatures, including our coral reef, getting suffocated by ghost scales, as well as our mangrove roots getting entangled and suffocated by the different trash, plastic bags. Then it boils down to how do all of this affect us, especially ourselves if we're not out there. So like I said, we've been collecting a lot of microplastics. So microplastics are literally plastics ranging between 1 millimeter to 5 millimeter. And then we have smaller plastics that goes below 1 millimeter, and there will be nanoplastics. And they're so small, they break down from your huge plastic bag that we have, or break down from your plastic bottle. So over a course of perhaps say 5 years, 10 years, all of this plastic will disintegrate and break down to even smaller plastic particles. And it will find their way into the food chain. So the small microorganisms that live along the shorelines will ingest all of these microplastics. And eventually, these organisms will be eaten up by bigger fishes and eventually find their way into our food system, in our food chain. So into our favorite food, the chili crab, ikan bakar, we have our mussels as well, spaghetti vongole. So these are different ways, yes, it really impacted us in our food chain as well. So then understanding all the different threats pertaining to the wildlife, the environment, as well to ourselves, then what can we do to help? So the most easiest way for us to do anything is to change our habit and lifestyle by adopting the 4Rs. So to refuse, to reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I'm always advocating to refuse the usage of plastics. So any one-time plastics is possible, you try to reduce them, or rather refuse them. So not take any plastic straws, not take any one-time plastic bags. Try to bring along your own plastic containers for takeaway, wherever possible. Then you want to reduce the amount of wastage as well. So the more plastic you buy, the more you have to throw. So then people ask me, what does the 4R have to do with marine debris? How does it even link it back? Marine debris is something that we toss unknowingly or toss intentionally into the waters. So if I'm living up in a mountain, will I then will not have any contribution to marine debris, right? So my answer to them is that a lot of this trash are being transported by wind, and it falls into our canal system, into our rivers, into our streams, and eventually find their way out into the open waters. So if we can reduce the amount of trash that we throw into our public bins, into all the public bins that we have, and not have that public bin being stacked up to the maximum before the next monsoon season comes or bad weather comes about, and that particular bin get tossed away. Or perhaps we find inconvenient to throw any of this trash away, and we just casually just drop them anywhere, or say we go for a picnic and we somehow forget our trash. A lot of times this trash will then find our way into the open waters. So if we could reduce our amount of trash that we have, we then make a certain change to the amount of trash that we can find along our waters. Then, of course, last and not least, but to start the cleanup and also to collect data. So I'll share a story on collecting data for a cleanup. So we can always do cleanup every day. We do it in the morning, by the night, the high tide comes in and the trash will just be replaced again. So no matter the amount you have did for today, will be sort of wasted because the next amount of trash will just come in. So we adopted in a different way by collecting more and more data to know the kind of trash that we have along our shorelines. And what we do with the trash is that we compile and we try to isolate where a certain trash comes from. So back in the days, say about between 10 years ago, we have many cruise ships along Singapore. So a lot of people go for cruise. And the cruise ship company will give every person a plastic bag, a cruise plastic bag for marketing purposes. We have the cruise logo on the nice plastic bag that no one uses. So while you're on the cruise, a lot of them might accidentally toss them off the waters by being on the deck by the swimming pool. They just leave it hanging around and it gets blown into the waters. So over the years, while we're doing the cleanup along the shoreline where the crews are, we started collecting a lot of this cruise plastic bag, and we know it is from the cruise because of the logos on the plastic bag itself. So with all this data, we then went to the cruise company and showed them, hey, a lot of this trash that's happening on our shoreline comes from you. If you could change the kinds of freebies you use to market or give out to your customers, uh, we can then reduce that kind of plastic trash that's found on the shorelines. So true enough, the cruise company took initiative to change, and we stopped finding cruise plastic bag along the coastline. So this is just some of the ways where data collection can actually help with marine debris itself. So at NSS, we do a lot of coastal cleanups as well on the northern islands at Pulau Ubin, Pulau Tekong, on the northern and southern shores of Singapore as well. So be it dirty shorelines or sandy shorelines, we'll always be there to do a certain cleanup. So everyone can actually play a part. You're never too young to be involved or to help out as well. So as young as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, as long as you're able to run and walk, can always help us with data collection at any cleanup. So at any one point, if anyone cross by Singapore and you want to do a cleanup, just check us out on the website. We'll always be there. Yeah. So that will be the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lester. I would like to open the floor for the question, if there is any. You can just type hi so that I can unmute you immediately.
Good morning, Mr. Lester.
What?
Hi.
Hey, good morning. It's already of evening. Good afternoon. Hi, it's Dr. Puan here from InnoSam. Okay, just want to. I mean, it's a very good. It's very good works of you on that Singapore part. So I just want to ask. I mean, like during your cleanup, I mean, did you tend to also collected debris from outside of the Singapore? I mean, like maybe a debris from Indonesia or outside of your country. I mean, do you have that?
Yeah, so those make up a huge bunch of our marine trash. Because we're on an island and we're along the sea currents, a lot of this current bring in trash from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Philippines, and it's very obvious because of the branding that they carry, a certain brand that a certain country owns, and it's being found on shorelines now.
Right.
So they're quite a common find actually. Yeah.
Do you know any the most country that you find along with all your data?
So on the northern part of Singapore, it's really often that trash comes from
Yeah.
towards the southern side of Singapore. A lot of the trash actually comes from Indonesia. If you were to be on the eastern part of Singapore, then you get trash from all over the world. So trash from China, from Philippines that wash down towards the South China Sea into the eastern part of Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Great. And there is one more question from the audience. I hear that the latest threat aside plastic is the face mask. What is your view on it?
Okay, so like any trash, I would say like tissue paper or paper, like materials that can be blown by the wind. These are the trash that can find their way out of the dustbin that is not very structured to withstand strong monsoon winds or any storms. And this trash can then be found on the shorelines. So this threat itself, it's pertaining itself, it's very strong. We can find a lot of these face masks along the shorelines as well. So if everyone is being responsible, able to have this proper waste management, then we might not have such a threat. Yeah.
There is one as to unmute. Dr. Fikri, perhaps you can ask the question directly. I tried to unmute you.
Sorry, I'm just a student. I'm a marine student from IIUM. I'm a third year marine student, and I would like to ask Mr. Lester, the initiative that NFF has taken in bringing the awareness of marine debris to higher authorities such as the government or people with authority to ensure that this awareness has been spread in Singapore.
So we are working with International Coastal Cleanup, as well as the International Coastal Cleanup Branch of Singapore, so ICCS. All this data gets collated together. So we do a major cleanup once a year, every year, routinely. And this data then gets feedback to the government as well in terms of the kind of trash that we have. And the government is aware that such cleanups is available, and they have stepped up by having some, they build up some infrastructure for us to store facilities for us to store our trash items for us to do cleanup. So like our gloves and plastic bags. So they set up facilities for members of public to actually do their own cleanup. So this is just one way that the government has already responded from this initiative that we constantly bring in people to do cleanup. So they allow members of the public to do their own cleanup. On top of that, the government has also looked into the different policies in terms of waste management. So factories and industries have to follow a certain guideline, and so they do not do any tossing of waste, flushing of waste, or just discarding any of their huge items anywhere. So a lot of these guidelines can still be improved, but we're still working towards it, trying to find which industry actually has a problem with waste management, and they just try to find shortcuts to toss it over the shorelines. But more than ever, I think we've been very well in terms of waste management from waste to landfill, to waste to incineration to landfill. Yeah.
Okay. There is one more question from UMT, University Malaysia Terengganu. Any specific publication on the impact of debris on the water birds or seabirds from Singapore?
Sadly, I don't think I know of any right yet. We do not have any specific studies on impact of marine debris onto water birds right now. Yeah, but that would be an area that we can look into.
Okay. I think the answer is very clear. And the further question is from some participant. On the current pandemic COVID-19, what are the activities to protect the marine life?
I think it's easy to just head out to the beach. If you're by the beach, you see your trash, you pick it up. That's the easiest thing we can do. The next easiest thing is to always be very responsible with your waste. So proper waste management at home and while you're outside, just not litter. That will help with the marine life that we have as well.
Okay. There is one more question from Noor Aisha. After the cleanup, where does the trash go next? And are there possibility that the trash that were collected will come back to the ocean?
Yeah, very great question. So usually after the cleanup, unfortunately, with all the plastic bottles we collect, we can't recycle them. We do not have the technology to recycle muddy, sandy, or contaminated plastic bottles. So all of this goes back to the incineration plant, back up, goes onto the boat, and goes onto our landfill at Pulau Semakau. Are there possibly the trash that were collected will come back to the ocean? Yes and no. So it really depends on how you bag your trash and where you dispose your trash after collecting them. So if you were to just leave it just by the bin again, in a flimsy bag that you just collected, the same theory goes again. A strong wind comes and it goes back into the water. Other possibilities is, of course, during transportation on the truck itself, somehow some trash do tumble their way out and eventually find their way back onto shore. So there's no 100% from the time when you pick up your trash all the way to the incineration into the landfill, unfortunately. So proper waste management by the government, the policies, and technology can actually help us.
Okay. There is one more question. I just wanted to reconfirm whether it is answered in the presentation or not. What are the initiatives that the NSS has taken in bringing the awareness to the awareness of the marine debris to the higher authority, to the government?
So what we did is we collect all this data. We always have stakeholders meeting, and we have different networks along the different parks and nature reserve. And most of our shorelines are next to a park, if not a nature reserve. And this data then feeds to all these networks in terms of what they can further do, or what kind of activities they can performed on the particular coastline where trash is highly found. And we do work with the government agency as well to clean up the shorelines if we need heavy machinery to come in to pick up a oil barrel, to pick up a monster truck tire. We will do that. And if it's a habitat, say for the shorebirds, particularly the mudflats, we have policies and laws to enforce that no trash can be disposed unlawfully, so by the industries or by the factories as well. So yeah, those are kind of ways we have progressed throughout the years.
Okay, there is one more question which is more related to it. Is there any solution to clean up trash that is in the seabed of the ocean? I mean, seabed or the ocean bed?
We have a few groups in Singapore that does clean up by diving. So we have different groups of people heading out to dive to just literally pick up liquids. We do not have any major solutions right yet. Right now, it's just manual labor and a lot of education. So a lot of awareness going on with just one particular dive to just clean up some plastic bottles. And also collecting the data that the legacy trash that we can find in offshore pits as well.
Okay. Thank you, Lester, for your presentation. It's very enlightening as well. Due to time limit, I would like to thank Lester for his presentation. And if there is any more question, you're most welcome to contact Lester through NSS, and he's always available.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I would like to introduce the second presenter. Let me open the file first. Muhammad Faisal Abdur Rani. He is currently a co-founder and the program director of Impactlution. Yeah, head of the waste management division for the Sustainable Business Network Association Malaysia. He's also an advisor for Generasi Peduli Sampha and the lead program and the event for the International Solid Waste Association Young Professional Group, Malaysian chapter, specialized in the sustainable waste management practices, learning, and projects. And without further ado, he has a big CV, of course, a lot more to introduce about Mr. Faisal, who is a resourceful person, and he'll be presenting his presentation, and we will be enlightened out of it. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Faisal.
All right, thank you for the introductions. Let me just share. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right.
Visible, of course, but you can make it max. Yeah, 5. Perfect.
Okay. So I think like Lester has kind of showed in terms of the importance of like all this kind of cleanup operation and data collection, and what I'm talking is beyond the cleanup operation. So why the importance of data, it's really needed in this area to solve the issue of marine pollution. Just a quick introduction about myself. I'm a chemical engineer, basically by trade, from Montana State University, and I don't have any title as a doctor, so just a correction there, but I am a certified green project manager. So yes, so I've been kind of like associated with a lot of groups, like I'm the head of the waste.
Faisal,
yes.
Please maximize it. I mean, screen.
Let's see. Okay.
It's perfect now. Please.
All right. So okay. So yeah. So I'm the head of the waste management division for the Sustainable Business Network Association of Malaysia. Advisor for the Generasi Peduli Sampah in Malaysia, and then the lead event program for the International Solid Waste Association Young Professional Group for the Malaysia chapter, and co-founder of Impactlution social enterprise. So in the last few years, this is all the recognition and awards that I've received, all the efforts regarding trying to continuously doing data collections as well as awareness regarding the pollution littering in Malaysia itself. And I feel like I'll start with the whole Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And I think this is the information that everyone have seen so far, right? So information is very crucial, especially when we want to tackle the issue of marine pollution itself. Without this information, without this basic information, we're unable to really understand the massiveness of this, the issue of marine pollution. But when we look at all this information, it is very generalized. It's very big. How do we digest it? And this is where we're looking at plastic pollution. Like plastic pollution in the whole narrative we've seen, it is a common narrative to see all of this impact. It is it's all over for the last 2-3 years. But the question is, have we make a dent in tackling the issue of marine pollution? Now, in 2020, plastic production will reach about 500 million tons per year, which is 900% more than in the 1980s. And it's pretty much more and more and more as we are nations depending of mass-produced packaging, or at least unsustainable packaging. But when we talk about plastic pollution overall, it is very generalized society. The idea when we talk with plastic pollution, right, we see this. We see packaging, we see the everyday product. But in realistically, it's like, let's say 46% of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch itself is made of fishing nets. That means not just from the consumer side, it is also from the industrial side itself. If 46% are from our own activities, that means from the fishing, that the reliance for us to extract resources from the sea, fishing, from the fishing activities. So we need to look more how to tackle. And the data that I'm sharing as well, this is for Malaysia for this year for the International Coastal Cleanup, where we see that for this year for the International Coastal Cleanup, we see more of the plastic bottle. But at the same time, if we look at the data, which I'll share from 2018-2019, the data for the cigarette butts has been increasingly closing to the plastic bottles, right? So that means it's like, this is where we're seeing more of the other type of waste increase, where when the efforts is concentrating on one portion, we forget the rest of the data streams, right? And problem with tackling marine pollution, right? This is where in the last few years, doing cleanups and collecting data, we've seen that data is scattered and used and thrown all over the place. But how do we interpret this data? And this is a very important. More important is lack in the localization of data, right? So one of the problem that is tackling marine pollution, this is the two problems that we've seen so far. One, data is scattered and used and thrown all over the place without any real understanding of what those data means. Second, the lack of the localization of data, because we rely so much on data that is international, but does it really reflect back in the Malaysian context? And this is what under the Generasi Peduli Sampah Impact Mission, we're trying to make the difference in localizing this data. Now, even if there is localization of data, the fact that there is a lack of sharing and coordination of this data, it is hard to really know what is available. And I guess all of you guys are in this field, when you try to find data, you will find the international data. When you try to look more of the localized data, a lot of groups are holding to this data and to their life, where it's not really shared or make aware there is localization of data. And even if there is localization of data, they are from an academic setting, right? Let's look at this. Is it valid? What is the methodology of this data? So this is where it is also being kind of like disputed among academicians, researchers. Is the data usable, right? Auni. So, but what if we can unite the efforts, right? So this is what I want to introduce in Malaysia. So a part of one of the impact action effort, we with a group of we actually set up a localized initiative called the Generasi Peduli Sampah, which look beyond the cleanup itself. Basically, Generasi Peduli Sampah right now is an NGO that set up to look into beyond the cleanup, where we want to gather as much of data. All our cleanup is emphasized on waste audit or brand auditing itself. And this is where we're building up to the brand audit, because we want the competency in terms of doing all this brand audit, how data is not able to centralize or use. Then the education portions, the conservation, as well as the sustainable resource management. And remember this, is I use sustainable resource management, not sustainable waste management, because I like to quote this from Arbachmeister Fuller, because pollution is nothing but the resources we are not harvesting. We allow them to disperse because we have been ignorant of their values. And that's why we call it sustainable resource management, not sustainable waste management, right? And then look into the localization of data and information, right? So when we move beyond cleanup, right? Beach cleanup, this is what we're just saying. Beach cleanup activity is something common we see in Malaysia itself. Every single month, there is some going on. So in Malaysia, if we look at all the efforts, in each state, we have groups that is dedicated doing cleanups and cleanups and cleanups every single month, every single week, right? So either it's a monthly basis or yearly basis or International Coastal Cleanup Day. But however, it's time each organization and cleanup activity to move beyond just cleanup activity, but as a citizen science data effort to better map out and contribute data to solve the issues of marine pollution itself. Let's look how it's important, right? So in impact pollution, we've been gathering all this data since 2018 itself, understanding the waste profile, right? So in 2018, this was the data for the International Coastal Cleanup Day. For the, we see the higher concentration was more on the plastic bottles, then the cigarette butts, grocery bags, bottle cap and straws. And then we moved to 2019. So 2019, during the World Cleanup Day, which is also the same day as International Coastal Cleanup Day, in Malaysia, 76% of the location was more on the coastal area rather than the city area. But we can see data, because reflecting on 2018, 2009, what was the effort has been done in terms of the awareness with the whole campaign in Malaysia, with the Tanah Straw campaign, with the zero waste movement in Malaysia. We can see the shift, right? But the structure side of all this, we can see that while the numbers of participation, the numbers of location was increased, yes, the collection is increased as well. But in terms of the top contributors, we see there's a shift from the plastic bottles to the cigarette butts. Cigarette butt has overtaken. So this is where we're saying, as we go on, the more data we collected, the more that we progress, we are able to tweak the efforts regarding how do we tackle marine pollution itself. So we can't just being stagnant, right? In terms of how can we tackle the marine pollution, it must be dynamic. It must be ever changing. Every single year, we have to analyze this data and move the program and shift it so we are able to balance out, rather than just like tackling one issue and then to hit a stagnant point and then suddenly we see there's a different problem, right? So we have to make this data available, dynamic, and move so we are able to constantly improve the effort in tackling marine pollution. Yeah. And among the reasons why we're saying why data is important, right? So we've seen these posters, right? We've seen the top 10 corporate plastic polluters in global brand audit. We see the name of PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Nestle, P&G, Mars, Unilever, all of these are international. Yes, because why? They have an international outreach. As a big conglomerate side, they have operation in every cities, and every city is reliance on this product. But what we are forgetting in Malaysia is also a producers of all this product. We have local producers, some of the big local producers that is penetrating the Southeast Asia market, the halal market, and produce the same packaging. And yet we are not putting our local producer who are invested in plant, who has a network in the plastic producer locally that is supplying globally as well, to take ownership. While we are talking about big boys, we are not talking about the big boys locally in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia. As a producer side in the Southeast Asia region, how can we look into putting the localization of this data in a way that we are putting them responsible, right? In 2019, the reality of the waste audit, this is what we see in terms of data-wise. We see the biggest contributor in terms of plastic when it comes to from the brand audit was the unbranded plastic, right? This is our grocery bags. This is our air ikat tepi from Mama. This is our single-use packaging, right? So in terms of the numbers, that means the use of single-use plastic, unbranded plastic is still the biggest contributor, not the mass production, right? Then the second was John and PT Udangan was those are cigarette boxes, right? Then it comes to McDonald's, KFC's, then Universal Robina Corporation, that is the Jack and Jill's. Then we have Mami, then Nestle, Gardenia, Yost, Mighty White, Marigold, Dutch. So when we have a lot of this localization of data, it is easier for us to really talk about how can we make corporation take ownership of their waste, right? That's what we want to do. And we need to move towards that area, that effort in terms of localization all of this data. And in Malaysia, how can we start to help out? Individually, organization, and corporate, what we are asking is, let us start sharing data of waste from every cleanup through either impact solutions that we have created our own website where people can send the data itself, or use the CleanSwell app where it's like the data is accessible to everyone. So every researcher can access this data. All of this data can be put in one location where it's able to be verified, it's able to be stored, and everyone can access the data itself. Yeah. Then there is local initiative in Malaysia. It's like Impact Solution for us. We are also a part of the Clean Seas campaign with Sea Circular and everything. So individually, we can also say to join us for the to take a pledge for refuse, reduce, and reuse. And why I don't put recycle in this as a zero waste practitioner, those will always be the last portion of the whole effort. So what we want to emphasize is refuse, reduce, and reuse. And it's important to refuse, reduce, and reuse because our data have shown the use of single-use plastic, the unbranded plastic, are the biggest contributor that we can start to eliminate from the plastic chain of custody in terms of the consumer, right? So, and then creating a lot of this effort awareness, like with the hashtag Clean Seas and Clean Seas Malaysia, that's where we're trying to take the next step in Malaysia itself to look into a more, create a more of this campaign and awareness. Then everyone can spread the awareness with a concerted plan if we create a program with sustainability at hand and impact measurables, right? So this is where we want to really create a lot of these efforts at this moment. So just to share a little bit, it's like why looking at all this data again, it's like, look, when we talk about the sources, it's like there is debris collected from, let's say, land and the water cleanup. There's a different percentage land cleanups and the water that we have to really understand, and we want to do this. So once we have that, so we really want to really understand. All right, I think it's like there's so yeah, so we really want to start doing this to really map up, because we want to understand when we really want to solve these issues, right, in Malaysia. We want to know, how do we solve this issue of waste pollution side, from the northern sides to the southern side, for the Sabah area, the Borneo area. We really want to map out all these possible leakages from land, rivers, and shorelines, and so we're able to look into all these efforts, right? So sorry about this. Okay. So, and this is where we have looked into partnerships. So Impact Solutions side, as a social enterprise, we've been involved with a lot of localization of programs. So with partnership with Generasi Peduli Sabah, Sea Circular, Reef Shark Malaysia, the Sustainable Business Network Association of Malaysia, we are trying to gather a lot of this information and share it out through the network itself, where we're able to solve the issue of marine pollution, not just from a kind of campaign point of view, but through policy making, through strengthen in terms of providing data side. So it backs up in terms of the efforts and measure. So we're able to actually create a difference. So that's it from me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faisal. And I would like to open the floor for the question.
Me, I have one question.
Yes.
I'm Hazlin from Kuliah of Engineering UIA. Okay, my question is GPS, Generasi Peduli Sampah, are you also working with the school? I mean, because you gather a lot of information, but is this information is, I mean, share with the student, because with the pupil, because they are the smaller kids, sometimes they learn better. So that if we inculcate this kind of culture, I think the next generation will be better, and in fact the environment will also be benefit.
Okay, so yes, Generasi Peduli Sampah, we have under our networks. Yes, we do work with school. So with schools, we have different approach, right? So in the kindergarten setting, we have a different approach in terms of narrative, in terms of the effort, because we want to start somewhere. With the sekolah rendah, we have a different approach itself. With the high school, we want to look into a different approach, because we don't want to have a blanket programs, right? Because blanket programs, this is what we've seen in the last few years. The blanket programs in Malaysia regarding 3Rs, regarding environment, is a very blanket. But what we fail is to really identify what is needed in the northern states. Is not going to be same. Let's say in Perlis, in Kedah, in Langkawi, it's not going to be the same in Selangor. Because why? The structure of let's say we were to do a 3R program, right? The structure in those areas might not be the same in the Selangor area. So if we have a blanket program, and yet those programs cannot actually reflect with what is the local infrastructure, so there's a disconnect. So we're trying to localize it as we go from state to states to look into how can we make the messages more comprehensive in terms of tackling the issue of not just marine pollution, on littering, on environmental awareness, to the localizations of the effort and the problem locally itself in those states that they can relate to. Yes.
Any other questions from the floor? There is one question posed, but it is, I think, for the previous presenter. But I can bring it to your attention, Brother Faisal. Is it okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
How does the mechanical beach cleanup gives an effect to the environment?
The mechanical beach cleanup, right? It's like one thing that we've seen so far is waste is coming in over and over again, and this is where the mechanical cleanup, if without the data collection of what is being cleaned up, it doesn't really help out, right? So when we don't have data that is really that we're able to understanding the source, right? So in Malaysia, like for example, it's like we have two sides of the ocean. We have the South China Sea side and we have the Malacca Strait side. Those two waste profile will be different because the different of activities, the different of the coverage, the waste, the activity itself, and who managing it as well. It is very different, right? So we need to create not just on the cleanup but the importance of the data collection. So this is what we're moving. Just doing a mechanical cleanup or normal cleanups, any cleanup without any data, it doesn't really help. It just helps to maintain, to remove, but it doesn't give us a format or at least a guideline. How can we solve this issue, right? So that's where we're saying that beyond cleanup, we need to move towards a beyond cleanup campaign where the rather than just normal cleanup, every time we do is cleanup, but we need to educate, implement in every organization, NGOs to contribute to data itself.
Okay. There is one more question asked. Have you given any feedback to the major polluters you have identified in your data collection?
Yeah, in terms of the feedbacks. So basic one of the effort that for us this year in partnerships, like we've actually kind of like talked to we did for the World Cleanup Day for the ICC in September. We actually did a program with Nestle, but we don't want them to just do the cleanup. We actually force every single individual from Nestle who participate in the cleanup to do the waste audit, for them to actually see the type of packaging that is collecting. So it's like the number of straws, to ask them to see, it's like reflect back, it's like in the productions, like how they can actually change, right, the packaging. So we do kind of like engage backside, and then we work closely with organizations that is participating or at least contribute. And yes, we try through the effort with the under the COPC with circular economy, with Reef Check, we provide them data, and they do work with other organizations, right? It's like I think it's like for us in partnership, we're also a part of the Circular Economy Club. By having all this data, it's like putting it out there. So we're trying to get all the partners, all the organizations that we're affiliated to, that able to help out. How can we make a difference? Like not just from cleanup operations, like even if recycling programs, is it successful? What need to be improved? And this is where we are putting all the efforts. However, it's like even while we're trying to do this, it's like the most hard thing is to really work with this kind of big boys, all these industry players, the lack of concentration of data itself. So that's why we're trying to bring all the partners in Malaysia, every organization that is doing all this effort, contribute data. When everyone contributed, there is a stronger backing of data, where it makes our argument stronger to make a difference, to force a lot of these producers, the plastic manufacturers, is like take responsibility in terms of the waste profile, waste that they are producing, and look into something more sustainable, a program that is not just a once-off program, but it's a long-term program that they are able to create a better change itself. But looking back, and some of these data, look back in Malaysia settings, because Malaysia is also one of the nation that we have a good recycling program, right? Recycling industry is existing. So how can this justify to some of this recycling if, let's say, they need to actually enhance their recycling capabilities, where we can able to move from what the percentage of recycling in Malaysia right now at 20 something percent to maybe to 50%, then to 100% itself, right? So we are on this effort right now. So the last few years, we've been concentrating in terms of collecting as much data as possible, and then to make a lot of this awareness. So we're able to map out. That's why one of the organizations we work with is the Sustainable Business Network Association of Malaysia. So this is where we want to talk about with relevant parties about green financing, like what is actually sustainable green practices, how can investors invest in actual green projects rather than just something that is green, right? It's like without actual impact measurement itself.
Yeah, there is one more question.
Mhm.
Through awareness campaign and other methods that you have taken, how fast are we gonna see the significant difference towards our marine environment? It's
In
reasonable.
term of fast, I can't say it will ever be fast itself because it is a whole structure system itself. If we look at marine pollution itself, it's like we have the land base, we have the fishing in that means the ghost nets, we have the wastewater. So if we look at the overall, right, it's like in terms of when we say it's like to tackle the marine pollution, every single of this small portions, it must be the policy making, it must be connected. So that means it's not just about plastic pollution, it's like from the use of single-use plastic or the recycling, but we have to look at the overall source. So mapping out all of this is really important. So it is a long-term process. It is continued. That's why in the beginning I said the effort in tackling of the marine pollution must be dynamic. So we need to know each problem. So side in the Southeast Asia side area, that means on the state of Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, Johor side, in that side, most of the ways is like we see a lot of ghost net. That means how can we put in policy in terms of enhancing in this in our fishing industry that to be more sustainable, to properly take care of their ghost nets waste on board. So we need to do that, right? And controlling the solution coming from the garbage patch or from other states is really hard because it's cross boundaries itself. So without data to support on a yearly to yearly basis where it can be extracted, interpreted, analyzed, and then change the direction for the next year rather than keep on the same narrative, the same effort. So it's hard to actually assess, have we make a dent in terms of the awareness campaign? Have we make a kind of like significant change in terms of the effort itself? So it is going to be a continuous battle, right? As long we have mass productions, as long we have big industries, as long we're still relying on export, import, especially in food production, it is something that is not going to end because packaging will remain there, fishing will remain there. So the question is, how can we move towards something realistically sustainable, something that we can make an effort, right? So we can't change the whole structure of how the world works right now. It's like unless everyone suddenly is like 100% become zero waste, local supporting local producer. We watch and trying to remove as much as producer, but that's not going to happen. So it's time to move something realistic. It's time to really support the data itself. It's through all the efforts, whatever it's like, either from recycling programs, local initiative, to really map out all this data, and we are able to make a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Faisal. Mr. Faisal, and if there is any more question from the floor?
Yes, from me. Assalamualaikum. Faisal Fikria
Yes.
from Marine Department UIA.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your data. It's very interesting to see, the statistic. So about the data collection or data sharing, so far do you receive any data from other organizations or other institutes? or
Um,
just started the data sharing?
we've been collecting data. That means that's why it's like the data that is coming from the ICC itself, from the Ocean Conservancy side. That is one of the main source of the data that we are getting, right? Our program so far is that for example the consumption of single-use plastic, we are getting those from the local data that we run through our program. For example, like the Malaysia Eco-Breakers Community Program. Data that is coming in from our weekly activities in terms of under Generasi Peduli Sampah to do cleanups, right? So those are the data that is contributing itself, and we do appreciate some of the local initiative, local group that is publishing their data, that we're able to use those data itself. So we are getting those data, but it's still, I would say, it's still not in abundance in terms of the data collection that we're able to justify any solution, because it's very it's not I think it's like all you guys know, it's like when it comes to research, you need a big data set. The collection points must be kind of like greater, in the sense that it must be able to come up with a solution, not just a generalizations. And we are trying that at the moment. So that's why this year, with the establishments like Impact Asia, we create our website. We really advocate using the CleanSwell app. So all of this data is accessible, that we're able to take. At the end of the day, what we are hoping that in Malaysia, we're able to actually talk about waste in Perlis, in Kedah, in Langkawi, in Penang, in Butterworth, in Selangor, in Melaka, in Johor, right? Every single state has their own enough data set that we are able to understand where is the gap. Is it from the waste management? Is it from the recycling program? Is it from the illegal dumping, right? So we want that to be done. And this is where all this effort, we're trying to bring in a lot of partners, a lot of collaborations, like to help to centralize, to contribute, so we're able to better understand, and we're able to justify to all the ministry level, from KPKT on waste management, Kementerian Alam Sekitar, and I on the marine pollutions or the river pollutions. So it is a continuous effort, I would say.
Thank you. If there is any other question from the floor,
Yeah, I have a question.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want your opinion on using biodegradable material. For example, biodegradable plastic or food packaging, something like that. So how safe it is if we, accidentally toss it into the sea? What's the effect that they give to us? Thank you.
Okay, regarding the biodegradables, so right now, for example, let's in KL, in KL the last few years we've been doing a lot of this awareness on biodegradable. But what we found, it doesn't change the mindset of littering, right? What we are giving is a way that is to, in a way, it's like halal kind the whole process of littering, because people just assume it's biodegradable, it's okay, we can just toss it away, it will degrade. No, we have to understand, right? So biodegradables, a lot of the technology is available, requires a certain setting for it to biodegrade. It doesn't degrade by itself, right? So it requires certain conditions, certain facilities for it to actually biodegrade. Most of the time, the biodegradables that are used, if let's say it ends up in landfill, it doesn't go away, it just remains there. The same goes with straw. In KL right now, we see the use from plastic straw has shifted to paper straw in some of these producers, packaging like the bubble tea and everything. But yet it doesn't solve the issue of littering. We see an increase, the reduction in plastic straw, but we see an increase in the plastic straw, the paper straw. So does it actually solve the issues? No, we're just substituting from one material to a second material, right? So that's why it's like we have to look into, the question is, do we really need this item? That's the problem with biodegradables, number one. Number two, the question is the source of the material for biodegradables. A lot of the producers right now are using PLA, right, polylactic acid, to make biodegradables. But the problem is the source of a lot of this PLA is actually competing with food source itself. So when you compete with food source, how is it actually in the sustainable development? How is it actually ethical? Are we depriving a local cheap food source for a local community to become a high commodity that they can't afford anymore, right? So we have to understand the whole move towards a biodegradable. It must be more sustainable than what it is right now. We can't just justify the use of biodegradable because it's better for the environment, but actually we are kind of like depriving or unethically putting down a community. So we need to know all of this. So looking in the whole area of sustainability, understand the whole structure itself. So marine pollution, it's not just replacing, it is a very complex. So coming up with a solution, this is what I'm saying, is like it's not something that is easy. Going beyond the cleanup itself, we have to really understand what is the end goal, what is the effort that need to be put in place. How are we going to execute this to make it better, right? So just opting out to different methods, the different materials, doesn't mean it is actually the right method. And I think like myself, let's say we put the refuse, reduce, and reuse. If we can refuse and eliminate it from the source, that will be the best, right? Once we refuse all this, the use of the single-use plastic, we can actually start to reduce.
Thank you, Mr. Faisal. Is there any other question from the floor?
Yeah, I've got one. Hi, Mr. Faisal.
Yes.
How are you?
Doing good.
Okay, so maybe this one also for Mr. Faisal. Mr. Lester is still here?
He's still there.
Okay, so I mean like we are a practitioner of a cleanup lah. My institute also do a beach cleanup for several times. So as a cleanup person here, I mean like I think it is not it's still not settled the root of the cause, right? I mean like we still have customer, we still have this supply and demands, and as a cleanup people here, when we do cleanup, the next month we do cleanup, and next 2 months, next 3 months, but the thing was that debris is still coming and still coming and still coming. And what is your opinion? I mean, on this, how can we? I don't know. Maybe some NGO doing this cleanup, but maybe, and then after a year, they say that this trash still keep coming and doesn't even less. So how we are going to find like, I mean, a strength, or maybe of what is the focus there? What can we do to, I don't know, to just need your opinion. And then because of this pandemic, I mean, like everyone is using the plastics box, the plastic mask and everything. I think will be more debris as coming later, right? What is your opinion?
Okay, so I'll start. For me, it's like I understand, because we've done this in KL, we've done this in Selangor, we've done in our project in APPGM in Kukup, right? Cleanups, the waste is coming. But this is where I think we have to understand the data, right? Once we have the data, let's say in the long-term roads, we're able to come up with plans, understanding the source of where is it coming from. Is it, let's say for a beach cleanup, right? The question is it consumer-based from the visitors, or is it coming from the ocean itself, right? So if we are able to identify the source of these waste, where it's coming from, we're able to put in measurements how to prevent, to do the prevention. That means coming out with an actual plan. If it's mostly coming from the visitors, that means how can we educate the visitor? Is it possible to do some sort of program of awareness, signage, continuous citizen enforcement, local groups that is there to take ownership, right? So that's how it we might not able to eliminate 100%, but we're able to take the first step. If the if the area itself, there's a river, for example, the shoreline side has a connection to the river. Is it coming from the river? Can we prevent it from the source itself? So that's why I say beyond cleanup, as long we have data to justify, to really study it, then we're able to look into how can we solve the issue, right? If not, it's just going to be clean up and clean up and clean up without any goals, because we don't have enough effort in putting in the data collection to really create an impact.
Thank you. If Lester want to add something more on this part?
Yeah, maybe Mr. Lester
Uh,
from Singaporean.
Singapore, what exactly the method? I mean, do they do any simulation studies and so on to find out how to overcome this problem?
So I think pretty much the same as what Mr. Faisal has said. We collect data and we try to clamp down where local sources, those are the easiest to solve. Your localized source that comes from perhaps your coffee shop, from your park goers, or from the industries, or maybe even the kelongs that we have along the streets of Johor. So if we can identify the local source, so say it's like refrigerator, tables, plastic bottles, these are all from local visitors, so from the parks, from the kelongs. So we need to come up with different policies. So perhaps the kelong have waste management issues where they don't get their waste cleared every day. So it's easy for them to toss overboard, for them to wait for a week for the boat to come and collect their trash. So when you come up with ways to solve that, then we can reduce just that little bit of local trash that we can find on our shorelines. As well as with the beach goers, educating them on a proper waste disposal to the bin, coming up with more facilities for park goers to dispose of their trash, and also to educate the people who sell the food and all on waste to reduce the amount of plastic that can be used. So these are different ways that we can tackle the local trash. But if trash are coming in from around the region, I think we need to take a step up in terms of trans-border communication, so we can help with regional stakeholders in ways we can help them with advocacy, in ways we can help them to promote. So I think if we can, beyond that, what we can do locally in Singapore is that we try to sieve out the trash. So along our canals, we have different sort of floating nets that we trap trash before it comes into our canal during the high tide. So during the high tide, our rivers are all now man-made canals, and we don't have like rivers anymore. So when the tide comes in, it comes in with all the trash, and these nets will then capture the trash at the waterway. And every day the trash will be scooped up by workers, by cleaners itself. So these are just some of the everyday things that we're doing just to ensure that our rivers and coastline are as clean as possible while working towards removing source bit by bit. Yeah.
Thank you, Lester. I think it's a good discussion, as well as the questions from the floor was very interesting. The answer from the presenters as well. With this, I would like to thank both the presenters for their time, sharing with us the knowledge and your data as well. With this, I would like to thank both the presenters on behalf of Institute of Oceanography and Maritime Studies, and we would like to invite all the presenters to join our upcoming webinar. Every month we will be having a webinar with the different themes and so on. You're most welcome to join, and we will share with you all the links and so on. And this presentation is also available on YouTube, so those who missed it, they can watch it a bit later as well. The link is shared in the beginning of the webinar itself. Thank you very much once again, everyone, and hope to see you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you, Mr. Faisal. Thank you, Mr. Lester.
Wonderful.
Looking forward to have more collaboration with both of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.